Hey, I want to walk you through how I went from full-time physical therapist to making over six figures in an online business in just over the course of a few years. I want to break it down in this episode. Hope you're ready for it. I'm absolutely excited. This is the first time I've really been dabbling live going into YouTube. First real episode. I'm hoping to make this a bigger series and excited to be talking about stuff. And I figure the first place to start is with my journey, which is going from being a full-time physical therapist working at a home health company where I was making probably around $70 to $75,000 a year and was feeling really burned out, really unhappy, and made some changes to where I'm at now and doing working from home, working remotely, running online businesses, and that have allowed me the freedom to live really wherever I want, and be able to travel. That's not to brag or boast, but to say, hey, I want to show you the path. I want to show you what I went through that has allowed me to leave corporate healthcare and really be able to work from anywhere. And the only time that I would even consider going back to working as a physical therapist is if I wanted to, instead of feeling like I had to. So I want to break it down and what went into this process. How did this work for me? And maybe you can apply some of this for yourself. And it really starts with a few things, learning that even the hospital system I was in was run by a business. And I started to think, wow, this is more of a business than I ever imagined. And maybe it was me by being naive going into the healthcare space, not really having spent much time in hospitals. Um, I really didn't know just how much of it is a business than it is a place where people just go to get help. And it really hit home for me when I remember I was driving actually to see a patient in Pittsburgh, where I'd been living and where I currently live now. And I noticed that the most billboard advertisements, like the most common business advertising on billboards, which take up these huge amounts of space across the city and across the skyline, were always hospital systems. Like I always noticed that the hospital systems, there are two really big ones here in Pittsburgh that compete against each other. They were by far and away the biggest advertisers on the different billboard places that you could put advertisements. And I was thinking, why does a healthcare company need to advertise? Like, doesn't it just exist for people when they're sick? And maybe you're way smarter than me, probably. You're like, yeah, well, of course it's a business. I just didn't know. I guess I assumed oh, people chose a hospital and they went there, but they're actively being advertised and marketed to when they're little, like when to their parents and trying to get their babies in to be seen. And it really opened my eyes. Like if a hospital system relies on marketing and advertising, surely that must mean almost every other business in the world relies on this. And this was me at 29, 30 years old, having a revelation. Like I kind of understood it, but it didn't really hit home like, wow, this must be a really valuable skill. If if hospitals need this, surely almost every other business needs this. And if we go back, I want to walk you through that was sort of a revelation moment for me. But a lot had been happening since then. I knew when I was in my first rotations as a physical therapist in school that I didn't think I was going to be super happy. I saw people working from 8 to 8, right, doing documentation notes. You had to write a bunch of stuff all the time. You have to mark down what you do. And I also noticed that they didn't get paid more for the amount of time they spent into the business, or sorry, for more value that they brought in terms of getting patients better. They only got paid more if they worked more. And this is the first thing, if you're listening to this, don't find a job that only pays you more if you work more. We call this sort of like an hourly paid role. And one of the best ways to stay stuck, trapped in a job or a business is to work an hourly role. Even if you're on salary, you're getting paid really hourly basis per units of time. There's nothing wrong with it. You just can only maximize the amount of time that you have. And I think this was really important when I had my first breakthrough was, wow, I only have so much time. I could only work 24 hours every single day. And even then, there's no way that that would be sustainable. And even then, it was going to take me a long time to work that many hours to really make the financial impact that I wanted. And I don't say this to scare you if you're a healthcare provider out there. I just want you to start thinking, does it have to be this way? And so I started asking, I was at a private practice and started asking, well, how do you make more money? And the answer is always, well, I just have to work more hours. And I thought, well, that seems crazy. how do you actually get paid more? And I started noticing. So I just started paying attention to what was going on. And the biggest problem the business always had, or this practice always had, was they needed more new patients. And I remember sitting and asking the owner that during that time, and I said, if if somebody could bring you more new patients, would you be willing to pay for that? And the answer was, yeah, of course. Like that's what I'm out here trying to do. And I had this moment and said, well, maybe I'm in the wrong place where maybe if I could help people bring in more business, I would actually be able to make more money. And so this was the beginning of my thought process of maybe I'm viewing my role in this system differently. Yes, I want to be a physical therapist. I wanted to help people. I wanted to change lives, but I also really wanted to make the amount of money that could give me freedom and not have to work 40, 60, 80 hours a week. And that's where my mind shift started to happen. I had to look at this and say, well, where do I put my energy? I went back to school. I still had a year left of school, went back and started asking these questions in school. And I wasn't really getting answers. And I look back and I don't think my teachers or my professors really had the answers. And so I was frustrated because I felt like I couldn't get the answers. And I don't think they had the answers. You know, they were academics and they were professors and they weren't worried about the business side of things. And so this was the first thing that I did to take action. And I highly recommend that you consider this is I started a blog to try to express my feelings. And I made it a solid 2 posts before I gave up. And I realized that writing wasn't my medium and I needed to find a different way to get my feelings out there of what I was doing. And so I actually started a podcast. And how I learned to create a podcast was I watched YouTube videos like this one. And there's so many cool, amazing tutorial videos out there. And I sat and I spent an entire day just watching how do you start and launch a podcast. And the first 6 or 7 episodes with my podcast partner, co-host, we were just talking to each other. And eventually I realized I don't have answers that I'm helping my co-host with, and he doesn't have the answers that can help me that I'm looking for. So we started to reach out and interview people. And I started to use Twitter because at the time, that's where I found a lot of physical therapists were on Twitter. And I just started reaching out and asking if I could interview them on a new podcast we were hosting. To my surprise, over 70, 80% of people, probably even higher, said, yeah, would love to come on your podcast. Now, this is me as a student, no background, no history, no audience, none of that. And they said, yeah. And this was my first realization that the power of marketing is incredible. If you are willing to put yourself out there, to network with people, to talk with people, even when you have nothing to offer them other than relative exposure, your life can really change. And it has since been a staple of what has allowed me to grow and to build a business that's allowed me to live the life that I want, which is I had to put myself out there and I had to talk to people and I had to create a platform for them to share their expertise. So when you feel like you have nothing to offer, you create a platform of media exposure and people will say yes. Doesn't mean everyone will, but a lot of people will say yes. In doing that process, I'd done a couple of things. I'd learned a skill, how to make a podcast, and I learned too, how to market and reach out to people. The next thing I learned was cool. So I was doing that podcast. I made zero money when I was starting. It wasn't even the goal. It was just to get answers, to figure out a better way for me to live as a healthcare provider. Now, here's the crazy thing is in this process, I went and I remember someone once texted us or sent us an email and said, hey, I don't have whatever platform you guys put your podcast out on. I think we were on Apple and Android maybe, but they were on some other type of system. They're like, can you have a website where you could put all the shows, the episodes? And I was like, oh man, a website would be great. And so what I did was I spent another weekend and all I did was watch YouTube videos on how to make websites. And I got into WordPress. If anybody's out there and you've made WordPress websites, man, oh man, oh man, right? Long time, like lots of figuring out themes and like how do you get things to integrate and plugins. And it took me legitimately an entire week's worth of time to finally have a functioning website. And it was daunting and it was brutal. But at the end of it, I now had a new skill. I knew how to make websites. And this ties together and how this all kind of came about and how this started my journey is that in this podcast of marketing, putting myself out there to try to solve a problem that I had for myself, which was how do I create a better life? And how do I get this message out about figuring out my life and health and wellness? I interviewed a prosthetics company and I interviewed the prosthetician, the prosthetist and the amputee and the business owner. And we sat down and we had a round table. And at the end of it, they were like, hey, we would love to run a podcast ourselves. Can we hire you? And I remember thinking, well, what would you pay me for? And they were like, well, to set up the podcast, idiot, and to help us grow it. And in my mind, I was like, well, I learned all that for free on YouTube. But they said they didn't want to go through YouTube. They wanted to hire someone to help them move faster. And this is where I learned the power of bringing value. And I realized that value came in the fact that they wanted more exposure to their business. And light bulbs started going off. If I can bring them exposure, people are willing to pay a significant amount of money to have exposure on their business. And this is where I said, yeah, I could help them. And so they started paying me. And it was $300 a month. I worked maybe 4 to 6 hours a month on it. And it was the first time I ever made more than $50 an hour. And I was geeking out. And when I did the math of what I was making as a PT, which was like $42 an hour when I was a student, I didn't even get paid, but like I broke down the math. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. I'm making even more money. And it's a really simple skill that I learned on YouTube. Well, funny enough, about a month later, they said, this is awesome. I think we want to have a website for it so people can find us. And we saw your website. Can you make us a website? And again, I thought, well, I just learned this for free on YouTube. Why would you pay me to do that? But again, they didn't want to do that. And I realized I had a valuable skill that they needed. And so they paid me $500 to build them a website. Now, at this point, I'd gotten smarter. I learned how to use things like Squarespace or Weebly, where you can make websites really fast and look just as nice. And so I got paid $500 to make a website that took me maybe 7 hours to build. Again, well over $50 an hour. And my mind was blown. I tie this all in because this has since led me to continuing to learn new skills, because the next thing they needed was, how do we get the word out? I had just been taking a course on Facebook advertising, and I learned how to help advertise their podcasts out to the broader marketplace. And because of that, because of marketing and putting myself out there, and because of sales, learning how to provide value and talking to people, and three, having a skill that a business needed and view as an investment instead of a cost, it set me on this path to start solving more and more problems that these businesses needed. And in my process of continuing to interview more companies and more people in business positions, these opportunities kept coming to me. So much to the point that I created an advertising agency that does close to 6 figures a year. And then I have another business with my business partner where we were teaching healthcare providers how to start online businesses. Now we help people with their business finances. That's what we moved into. But it's only because we were helping healthcare providers with their businesses and realized they didn't have control of their finances. And it's just been this series of solving one problem after another after another. And I say this to say, for where I'm at now, I run advertising campaigns for a lot of healthcare practices, as well as some online coaches and consultants at this point. And I help businesses with their finances and doing business coaching. And that's what's allowed me to do this. That has all happened within a 3-year period. And it's come from solving very specific problems starting out and really just being one step ahead of people. And what I've learned is that the big things that if you want to start making more money, especially as a healthcare provider, you want to look at how can I provide value to businesses? One, either I create my own business, and if that's you, I highly recommend that route. But two, maybe it's how do I provide more value to my current business and view your company as a business, not a place that employs you. Because if you can bring more value to them and you can bring them more business, you have every right to walk in and ask for more money. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's say you work at a practice and they need more customers, they need more patients, and maybe your schedule is always dependent on how many patients you have. Well, could you take a course on Facebook advertising or Google advertising and say, hey, I'd love to test running ad campaigns to bring in more business. If we have success, would you be willing to pay me more money to run these campaigns to bring in more business, so long as we can measure it and say that they're effective? I would bet, I'd hard bet that they would be far more likely to want to pay you for that than to see one or two more patients, because you're now bringing in an asset to the business that can continually bring them more business. And here's the cool thing. That's the marketing side, right? So how do you get better at marketing? First, you need a skill. So the skills that you want to learn are marketing and sales. When you can market, it doesn't mean you have to physically go out there. You can use the tools that exist now, like Google Ads, Facebook ads. You can run, Pinterest, all kinds of different places where you can put campaigns on. Start a YouTube channel for your clinic. And you want to be able to measure and say directly, hey, how can I tie that into measuring? Are we getting new patients from this? Are we building more business from this? Are we getting more business exposure? Because a business owner wants those things and they're willing to pay for them and see them as an investment more than a cost. The second thing is selling yourself and selling your services. So, one, you have the skill, you learn the skill. So, you got to go sit down, focus on that skill. For me, it was making a podcast, then it was learning how to make websites, then it was about Facebook, Google advertising, AKA lead generation for businesses. Two was you have to go apply those and market yourself. So you got to go talk to your business owner, your boss, or whoever and say, hey, can I do this? You got to go market yourself. Talk to people that you can do it. The third thing is you have to sell your services. And the cool thing is, if you're in healthcare, like me, I was a physical therapist. I was selling people on some of the hardest stuff every single day without knowing it. Now, yeah, there was no like financial, hey, it's going to cost you this much money for me to treat you. But I was convincing people, especially in home health, who didn't even want to get up and move. I had to get creative to help them see the value of getting up and moving. And I didn't even realize in that process, I was mastering my sales communication skills. I was selling them on how and why it would be better for them to actually get up and move when really they just wanted to sit or relax or not put in effort. And so I promise you, if you're in healthcare, you're a better salesperson than you even imagine. And all you have to do in the early sales part is ask them, well, where are you at now? Where do you want to get to? And what's keeping you from getting there? And if you can help them break that process down and figure out that your skill set, aka if you've learned marketing in this case, or sales that can bring them more new patients, more new clients, more new customers, you will help them fall into realizing that they don't know how to do it and they need someone to fill that gap. And if you have the skill set, you should be compensated for that. And that's the process I've gone through over the last 3 years to go from working full time as a home health physical therapist to now running a six-figure online business where I help people with marketing and sales and business coaching. And I don't know, this is my first YouTube video. I hope this is valuable. I hope it's helpful. I guess the biggest lesson I would say to share with you and love to impart on you is learn a skill that's powerful that helps a business, aka marketing, sales. Go put yourself out there to put yourself in positions to be able to apply those skills. Work for free if you have to. In fact, some of my first jobs were working for free just to test the skill. And hey, they would put an ad budget of $300 in. I'd get paid nothing, but I got to test my skills. I got to sharpen my skills. I got to do those things. And they were even able to pull me off of patient care to go test these things and paid me for my time to keep doing that, which for me was great because I just didn't want to see more patients. Like I loved what I did, but as an introvert, there's only so many patients I could see a day. I highly recommend that you test that out. And if you can learn the skills of marketing and sales as a healthcare provider, you can apply it either to your own business down the road or learn how to apply it to your current business. It will allow you to be able to raise your value as an employee. And when you can raise your value to not only as an employee, but to your company, you have every right to ask to be compensated proportional to the value that you bring to them. I hope this helps. If you've liked this, if you'd want to like this video, subscribe to the channel. I'll be putting out a ton more about business, about life, about personal development and growth. I'd love to have you join me on the channel. Go ahead and smash that like button, hit the subscribe button. I'll catch you guys on the next episode.